Hi everybody, Peter here. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about retirement, spending the rest of your life in Thailand. If you've got to that age and you're sort of fed up of living in your own country, you've done a lot of research and you've kind of thought to yourself, well, Thailand looks pretty good. I will assume for the sake of this video that you've never been to Thailand before. You've simply spoken with other people, you've done your research online, and you don't know the country at all, but you would like to retire. You're seriously considering retiring in Thailand. So I'll talk about locations and I'll give you my opinion on positive aspects and negative aspects of where you might choose to live. The first thing I'd like to say though, if you have never been to Thailand before, I would strongly suggest visiting the country for a minimum of 2 months. And what that would allow you to do it will allow you to country and make an educated decision on from what you've seen rather than what you've just read about on the internet. I can't imagine moving to a location, you're there a month and you decide you hate it. 2 months in Thailand traveling around, what would it cost you? I'd say comfortably you could get by on £5,000, $6,000. That's about 200,000 baht, 100,000 baht a month. You can go in on a 1-month tourist visa for 30 days. You can extend that for a further 30 days. The last time I extended my tourist visa, I did it in Blueport. That's a shopping mall in Hua Hin. Very, very easy. They've moved immigration out of there now while COVID's on. But you can get 60 days and it's pretty easy. When you apply for the second 30 days, I think I paid 1,800 baht, which isn't a great deal of money. So I suggest you go there for 2 months. If you can't afford to do that, you've got to think to yourself then, should you really be thinking about living in Thailand? It's a myth that Thailand's very, very cheap. It is, it can be. It depends how you live. If you live in a village in Isan and eat Thai food every day, yeah, it can be very, very cheap, but most people that I know, they want a balance of living like a Westerner and a Thai person, mix of the food and that sort of thing. So what about locations? For myself, personally, I'll give you an example of what I'd be looking for if I was retiring. I will be retiring eventually. I'll give you an example of what I would be looking for. There's positive aspects and negative aspects on depending where you choose. For example, you could go and live in Khon Kaen. That's a city in Isan. I lived there for 2 years in the early 90s when it was still a very small town. I think it's almost a city now, if it's not a city already. The only downside with Khon Kaen is you're not next to the ocean. It's not a beach town. It's in the middle of Isan up north. The positive aspects of living in a place like Khon Kaen, it will be considerably cheaper than places like Phuket and Pattaya because there aren't so many tourists in a place like Khon Kaen. You might choose to live in a very small village in Isan, not much Western influence at all. I mean, no McDonald's or Burger Kings or anything like that. A typical Thai village. You might decide to live there with a Thai lady and live the Thai lifestyle. Well, then you're going to live very, very cheap. The only negative impact on that is speaking to guys who have done that. The biggest problem for them is boredom. They get very, very bored very, very quickly because most people in those villages don't speak a good level of English. There isn't a lot to do. There isn't other foreigners that they can go and talk to and they get bored. There are exceptions, obviously. There are people who they love it and there are a few people they can mix with, that sort of thing. And sometimes the problem is in those villages you can fall into alcohol because that's what tends to happen in these villages with the Thais. They're not, I'm talking about the very, very small villages. They're not very well lit at night and the drinking culture becomes quite, it's a hobby for them basically. So where else? So let's say Bangkok, say you wanted to choose Bangkok. Obviously the positive side to Bangkok is it's a vibrant city. It's got absolutely everything you'd want. From American fast food chains, great Thai restaurants, gyms, everything, you name it, budget hotels, high-class hotels. Bangkok's got everything, great infrastructure, great transportation system. The downside, it's going to be expensive. Obviously, if you live in Bangkok and the closer you live to the western areas like Sukhumvit, where a lot of Westerners live, then it will be very, very expensive. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. You could choose somewhere like Phuket or Pattaya. Again, in Pattaya, the positive side of Pattaya, they've got a lot of Western restaurants. Most of the Thais who live there, work there, they're used to dealing with foreigners, so they generally all speak a good level of English. Most of even the motorbike taxis, they'll understand you. So that's the positive aspects of living in a place like Pattaya. And As I say, you'll come across a lot of Western restaurants you won't want for anything. The negative thing about Pattaya, it is going to be expensive. It's quite polluted. It's a little bit smelly, especially you walk along the beach front there. It's not the cleanest beach in the world. However, saying that, you can jump on a motorbike or the back of a BART bus and 15 minutes later you're in Chiang. That's a very, very nice area of Pattaya. And the good thing about living in Chiang is if you fancy a real night of action, going out, walking street, that's a very busy street with all the nighttime venues on it, then you're only 15 minutes away. So Pattaya is quite a favourite choice for a lot of people. Personally, if I lived in Pattaya, I'd live in Chiang, but I wouldn't live in Pattaya. You could go and live in a place like Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai is quite cooler because it's in the mountains. I've actually been there. I haven't lived there. I've spent some time in Chiang Mai. There is quite a lot of foreigners, Westerners living in Chiang Mai. You'll find there's a big IT community up there, people who basically make their living on the internet. They do all sorts. They're vloggers. They have YouTube channels. They sell things. They make online classes, all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of IT people in Chiang Mai, and they tend to be younger, anywhere between 20, 35, that sort of age. A lot of tourists go to Chiang Mai. As I say, it's cool. It's not as hot as the rest of the country because it's surrounded by mountains. Now, down to personal choice, where would I live? I think if you're a regular viewer to my channel, you know what I'm going to say here, guys. I choose Hua Hin. The reason Hua Hin, because for me, it's a kind of midpoint between somewhere very, very rural and the concrete jungle, Bangkok. I don't like to live in Bangkok, and I wouldn't like to live in a village in Isan. Hua Hin, for me, it's a bit quiet for some people, but it's got everything you'd want. You can rent a motorbike for, 150 baht a day. You can get a one-bedroom apartment for 15,000 baht a month. You can even get a room for 5,000 baht a month, depending on your budget. There's some great beaches. It's quite cheap. They've got a couple of very, very good shopping malls. There's a couple of streets of bars. There's no go-go bars, but there's some good bars in Hua Hin. And it's just, as I say, for me, it suits me because it's got absolutely everything that I'd want out of a retirement. I wouldn't want to live in a sleepy town. And I wouldn't really want to live in Bangkok because of the pollution and also the cost of living. So the great thing nowadays, it's not like the 80s. You can actually do most of your research online. It's all out there. You can just explore every single town on the internet. But as I said at the beginning of the video, if I was you, if you've never been there before, try and go for 2 months. There's no problem with a visa. £5,000, $6,000. That'll get you by for 2 months. You can travel a week here and a week there. You can go back to your country and you can have a good think about it. And if you wanted to come back a second time and spend, say, a month in the one location that you think you'd like to live, just to see how it feels, then you could do that. Obviously it depends on your budget. It will vary for different people, and lots of different people will have different needs and different wants. So I hope that's given you some kind of an idea. If you've been there already, that's a real bonus point because you've got some kind of an idea how it all works. Okay, so I'll catch you all on the next video.